I see it kind of like a cloud that's in a room, whether it's in our locker room after the Oregon game, when things don't go well, and it's really hard to kind of wrap your arms around what it is that went wrong. And it's not always the same thing. I think, there's a lot of little things that go on in the game of basketball. And when you look at the Washington game, we made some plays. We were, our coverages were correct, made shots when we needed to. And then when you run out, in that case, of 45 minutes of the game being over, we managed to make just enough plays. There's so many of these games in our conference that are being decided by one or two possessions that it's a pretty fine line. And we don't want to have the last play always be the one that's magnified, but take a lot more pride in the possessions leading up to that. And then to answer the question with the Oregon games, Oregon State, we weren't good enough going down the stretch. We built ourselves a 10-point lead and did it the right way. Defensively, shared the ball, made shots. We were really good, for a large portion of that game. And then I think starting at an end out of bounds play where we were kind of milling around, and it's so ironic because in our shoot around, we were guarding end out of bounds plays and everybody was standing up. And as small of a thing as it might seem, you got to be down and engaged, and we call it like have an arm bar and be in a stance, and here comes whatever their set is. And as you watch that play, we were kind of wandering around, had a couple guys that weren't locked in, the referee gave them the ball, and it's a 3-point play. And then we missed the free throw block out and they hit another basket. So a 10-point lead goes to 5. And we can flash back to that 10 seconds in our shoot around where I talk about a little thing of being ready on an end out of bounds play. So that's one of those huge plays, the proverbial 5-point play that could be, man, let's just get locked in. Maybe we got a chance to take the 10-point lead to 12. So that's the way basketball rolls. It's not always energy. Sometimes it's brains, and sometimes it's a matter of making open shots. It's never the same story on any game, and I think that's why watching college basketball is pretty intriguing, because there's a lot of unknowns and different storylines. It's not boring. You can't always predict the future or the ending, and we've just got to get dialed in and take a lot more pride, as I said, in possessions throughout the course of the game and not be making mistakes, and making it as tough as we can on the other team instead of beating ourselves. I have no problem getting beat. I don't like when we make mistakes and I feel like we beat ourselves.
Coach, when you're facing back-to-back losses, what can you learn from your team when they're facing adversity like this, and maybe at this point in the season too, where you want to get things on track with the tournament and all that on the horizon?
Well, it's really no different than if you win 2 games. I don't know how much you take into it for the next game and start thinking about how you feel good and, man, we got to keep this rolling. It's really a stay in the moment, point. And we learned a lot from the Oregon losses, and it's got to be just as I said. Let's figure out how to win the first 4 minutes against Washington and control some of our own destiny without regard to what took place in the past or the fact that we got a bunch of home games coming up. I think it's more of the sense of urgency to just be in the moment right now, and we've got a resilient group based on our practice yesterday, and the guys were ready to come in. Nobody feels sorry for themselves, and a little bit of it's having to struggle together. That was something that came up yesterday. It's interesting because the word compassion is part of our program. That's one of our words in our program. And as I was doing yoga yesterday, the instructor talked about how it was a big week for compassion. And compassion in her definition, and there's millions of definitions of it, we talk about coming with passion on every play and how you treat people. But she had an interesting comment, was that compassion is not necessarily to be confused with empathy, where you could feel sorry for somebody. But compassion was actually more of the concept of you have to struggle together, and if you want to take action rather than feeling sorry for somebody, jump in their shoes with them, try to lift them up and help them. and it was just a real unique and interesting twist on a word that's already in our program. So we've kind of built this little shack for ourselves. We're struggling, you know. We've got a couple of losses. We got to deal with it, and we've got to do just as in the yoga class. Let's find a way to pick each other up and try to lift the level of our play. I've always been a little apprehensive to, put anything in a barn ahead of time. It's the same concept that Washington's a really good team coming in here. Been in a lot of even the games that they've lost, it's been competitive right down to the wire, and they're ahead of us in the standings. So, traditionally, and if you look at history, we've defended our home court pretty well, but that's nothing we're going to take for granted. We've got a pretty good game plan going in. I expect to have a real solid practice today and get after them Wednesday night. But we're really not looking at those kind of numbers, 5 or 7. We're pretty focused on 1, and that 1 is being the next game that we're playing. And the schedule does tip a little bit, as we look at it, but nothing's to be taken for granted for sure. It's a great challenge. We just met for about an hour before this meeting, and there's a number of things that they do. Sets that they do, and it's different little packages. You don't always know which way they're going to come at you in terms of what play families they're going to use, but at the end of the day, you've got the leading scorer in our conference in Murray, who's a tremendous combination guard as well, a freshman. There's a bunch of freshmen that are playing with confidence. Chris, the list goes on. It's Andrew Andrews that's kind of the father figure of a young group that plays with a lot of pace and confidence on offense, and they make things hard for you defensively too. They give you a lot of atypical looks when they're guarding you and force you to do things and try to take you out of things that you're not comfortable doing. And so we've got our hands full for sure. There's a reason they're leading the conference in scoring, because they have a lot of firepower and guys that get after it. They get up and down the floor. They do a nice job of rebounding, and they have all the pieces. They've got guys at each position, certainly that can get a lot of things done.